Hey everyone, it's me again, Brittany, and I'm here today to do my July wrap-up. This video is gonna be long because this is probably my biggest wrap-up to date. If not my biggest, then at least my second biggest. I read 19 books last month. Let's give you a couple of stats before we dive right in. I gave 7 books 5 stars, I gave 3 books 4.5 stars, 1 book 4.25 stars, 5 books 4 stars, 2 books 3.5 stars, and 1 book 3 stars, which averages out to 4.36 stars overall. It was a really good reading month. I enjoyed almost every single one of these books. And I mean, like, really enjoyed, not just like kind of enjoyed. And I managed to read 2 graphic novels, 1 poetry collection, and 2 novellas. And the rest were all novels. Let's just dive in because I don't want this to be a 30-minute long video. I'm gonna really try to keep this short and sweet. The first book that I read this month was Champion by Marie Lu. This is the 3rd book in the Legend trilogy. I gave this book 4 stars. It is the highest I've rated any of the books, I believe, in this whole trilogy. I really enjoyed how it ended. I feel like it was everything that I really wanted it to be. So if you didn't know, this story is about Day and June, who are 2 people that are put into the most unlikely circumstances and kind of have to team together to help each other. We have June, who was a trained soldier for the Republic and who is probably one of the most prestigious in her entire class, while we have Day, who is one of the most notorious criminals in the Republic and has nothing good to say about it. I really enjoyed how this ended again. I think that it was a way better pace than Prodigy was. It's much more fast, much more action, much more realistic. I feel the way that June and Day were portrayed was a more realistic example of what I'd expect out of teenagers. I think my biggest complaint in Prodigy was that at times they just didn't sound their age. They didn't sound like teenagers, even though for most of the book they would. They would have these speeches that just were very adult. This book, though, did kind of jump forward in time at the very end, and I kind of wish, I don't know, I like that it happened that way, but I could have gone without it. The next book I finished this month was The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I actually enjoyed this so much more than I thought I would. I'd heard very mixed reviews about this book in particular, and so when I started reading it and enjoyed it immensely, I was pleasantly surprised. This book follows Alice and her mother, who are always on the road and seem to always be traveling to different places because they're trying to outrun their bad luck. And when Alice's grandmother, the notorious author of these dark and grim fairy tales called Tales from the Hinterland, dies and leaves her estate, the Hazel Wood, Hazel and her mother are forced into a situation that they can't escape from and have to face their past in the most unlikely of circumstances. This book was incredible again. I loved the fairy tales. I really hope Melissa Albert just comes out with a Tales from the Hinterland. They were so interesting, so dark. They followed all these sorts of different rules that fairy tales that we seem to know this day and age just don't go by. It was just a very good mix of dark fairy tale and magic while also being in the real world. I loved it. I loved the twist. I kind of saw it coming, but it's one of those things where you just don't really see it, and then it hit me right in the face and I loved it. After that, I listened to Crown of Wishes on audio. I gave this book 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but it wasn't everything that I wanted. I hadn't realized at the time that it would be following different characters than the characters from Star-Touched Queen. This is a sequel, sort of, to that series, but it doesn't really follow the characters that we followed in the Star-Touched Queen. This one actually follows Vikram and Gauri as they are entered into the Tournament of Wishes, which is this magical tournament that has completely different rules than what they'd originally thought, but if they are able to win, then they receive 1 wish of anything that their heart may desire. It's lovely. I loved being back in this world. I feel like Roshani Chokshi just has such a beautiful way of writing. I love how she writes her worlds. I love the realistic quality of it, and it's almost like delectable. Like, the way that she writes is very pleasing, and it makes the world so atmospheric, so beautiful. I just had a really good time with it, but it wasn't perfect, which is why, again, 4 stars. After that, I actually read a novella, Death and Night. I gave this 5 stars. I enjoyed it so much. This is sort of a prequel to any of the stories, and it follows Death and Night, obviously, as Death tries to court Night. And these are characters that we know if we have read The Star-Touched Queen, and it was so lovely to be able to see his courtship of her and to see all these stories that we kind of got a hinting of in Star-Touched Queen. It was just lovely. I loved seeing Night as a character. She was just so vibrant and lively and wonderful, and I loved Death as well because he was so misunderstood, but he was just a different version of himself when he was around Night, and it was just beautiful. I loved it. After that, I read Rumble by Ellen Hopkins. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really tend to like Ellen Hopkins books. I like that they're written in verse. I just tend to fly through them. This one, it wasn't my favorite. Honestly, I've been considering knocking it down to like a 4, maybe even a 3.5 star. It's just, it wasn't my favorite of her stories. I think that it had some really good messages though. This one in particular follows Matthew as he has lost faith in the world. He has no faith in his family. He definitely has no faith in his friends, and he most definitely has no faith in his school, which allowed for his little brother to be bullied into suicide. He is going through a grieving process in this book. We follow him as he comes to accept his brother's death, comes to accept the world that he lives in, and tries to bring some joy and hope back into his life. It was a very startling story. I honestly thought it was going to lead a very different path. I originally had assumed that this was going to be a talk about gun violence, because the way that they talk about it in the summary is he's decided to live large and go out with a huge bang, and whatever happens, happens. And while there is some talk about guns, it's not in the manner that I thought it would be, and this story really revolves around faith and what it means to have faith and what it means to give up on having faith in such a young character. It was an interesting discussion. It's just I hadn't known going into it that it was going to be mostly about like religion and being an atheist and things like that. That's why I've been considering knocking it down, because even though I did enjoy how it ended and I feel like it was a lot more positive than I thought it would be, it just wasn't exactly what I'd signed up for. The next book that I read was Damsel by Elena K. Arnold. I gave this book 4 stars. I liked this a lot more than I thought I would. I was nervous because I'd heard that this was dark and grim and disturbing, and while I agree there are definitely those elements, it wasn't overpowering in the way that I thought it would be. Instead, I ended up enjoying this quite a bit, actually. In this land, there has always been the right, and the right is when the king dies, his son, the heir to the throne, has to go out into the Grey Lands, find a dragon, slay a dragon, and rescue the damsel that is going to become his bride-to-be. And it's always been that way. That is how this kingdom has survived. So when Amma is rescued by Prince Emery and she wakes up to remember nothing of her past, nothing of being the damsel, nothing of being held captive by the dragon, and doesn't even remember her own name, she is eternally grateful to this man that rescued her and that gave her a name and that's going to take her to his land and make her his queen. But as more and more things start to arise, she has to truly wonder if she's more safe in her current situation or if she had been more safe in the clutches of the dragon. I loved it. I really loved it. Like, even thinking about it again, it was just, it was so good. I really do warn you guys, there are quite a few trigger warnings. There are trigger warnings for animal abuse, which is probably the one I had the most issues with. I tend to shy away the most from animal abuse. Animal abuse always tends to hit me a little harder, but there are other intense trigger warnings as well for rape and sexual assault and aggression, and just it really piles on, guys. Really check the warnings if you are sensitive to any of those kinds of things. But I liked it. It was dark. It really was. It's showing this like other side to being the damsel. I loved the way this ended. I think that if it hadn't ended in the way that it had, I probably would have given this way less stars because it kind of drags in the middle, not gonna lie. It was just one of those situations. I did kind of guess what the plot twist was. You kind of start to see hints of it throughout the story. It's pretty obvious, but I love that Amma kind of comes to accept herself in the end, and she does not take anyone's shit, and it was wonderful. It was well done, and I really liked the message that it had in the end. Next up, I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I gave this book 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but it wasn't a 5-star read that I thought it would be. In this world, there's no hunger, no war, no misery, and no death. The world has conquered it all, and the Thunderhead is in control. So without death, there has become a new way to control the population, and these are scythes. Scythes are supposed to have justice awareness in their soul and to look at someone's life and be able to assess whether it is truly time for them to die. And in this story we follow Citra and Rowan, who are chosen to become the apprentice of a Scythe, and they don't really want this fate for themselves, to become such a grim and dark figure in their society, to learn the art of taking a life. It is something they were unprepared for, but they soon discover that if they can't learn to become a Scythe, then perhaps their lives will be forfeit. This ended up being just so much more than them learning to take lives. It was sort of the government against itself. It was political. It was dark. It was what is right from wrong, who are we to decide what is right from wrong, and it was just so interesting. But also there was a love story, Citra and Rowan. They are the reason I gave this book 4 stars, I'm not gonna lie. I don't like how the love story was done. I just felt like it was very rushed. It was very unnecessary. I really feel like it would have been better if Citra and Rowan had just remained friends. I really feel like as friends they were already doing so well, and for them to just kind of throw in this love story almost felt like an afterthought instead of the main story. Oh, this next one. Okay, I finally listened to Morningstar by Pierce Brown. This is the 3rd book in the Red Rising trilogy, and Red Rising has become quickly one of my all-time favorite series, guys. It is just something that makes me so happy. I mean, happy is probably not the right word. It is a dark, 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 dark world, but as we're soon discovering, I seem to like the darkest stories. It was just so good! It was so good! The Red Rising trilogy follows Darrow, who is this red, but he was born to be more. In this society that color codes their people, that each color has a purpose and each color stays in their lane, Darrow has to be different. And when he becomes a gold, which is the highest ranking member of society, the leaders of their society, he is going to try and take down this world that seems quite unfair to every other color that isn't a gold. It is just so well done. This one in particular was so amazing. It wrapped up everything so well. I had no idea how we were gonna bounce back from Golden Sun. The end of Golden Sun was tragic. Pierce Brown did it. He brought us back. The first part of Morningstar, honestly, I was losing hope again. I was like, this is it. This is all we're ever gonna have. This is about as disappointing as anything can get. But I'm happy with the way Morningstar ended. I actually have a clip in my weekend reading vlog. I will link it. But check it out because I filmed myself reacting to the ending of Morningstar. Don't worry, no spoilers. And it was the funniest thing that I've done in a while. But I loved it. I loved this. It was obviously a 5-star. This is probably my favorite book of the entire month. Actually, it is my favorite book of the entire month. Next up, I read Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I loved this. This is a graphic novel. Its art is everything, and the story is so cool. This is set in a steampunk world where we have just ended a cataclysmic war between the humans and the Arcanics. And specifically, we are following Micah Halfwolf, who is sort of caught in the middle of both sides. As she goes through her journey, she learns that there is something more to her than what she'd ever known, and that maybe she should let go of the monster that's within her. It was so well done. It is so beautiful. If only for the art, guys, read this. This is everything. If you guys have any recommendations of graphic novels that are similar to this, let me know because I'm obsessed and I love it. I love it. Next up was Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I gave this 4.5 stars. I did really enjoy this. It just, wasn't perfect. I listened to this half on audio, half physically, but it was just an overall really cool experience. We are following the 2380 graduating class of the Aurora Academy, and specifically we are following Tyler, who is the star pupil of his class. He has the highest scores and he knows that he's gonna be able to get his dream squad. But when he finds himself distracted rescuing a girl from interdimensional space that has been in cryosleep for over 200 years, he gets back to find that he has been left with the leftovers for his squad, and he is pissed. Not only does he have to deal with his less than perfect squad, but he is sent on a mission that could change the world because Aurora, the girl that was in cryosleep, could be the spark that lights a war that is millennia in the making. It was so cool. I really enjoyed this. I think that Aurora was an amazing character. I feel like every single one of these characters had such a specific voice. We have Scarlet, who is just this motherly but badass and seductive kind of character. We have Tyler, who is the follow the rules guy until he isn't the follow the rules kind of guy. And we have Aurora, who is this girl out of time who has lost everything and is still trying to keep chugging along. There are just so many interesting aspects of this. There are so many interesting talks about like different sorts of aliens and what their lives might entail, and it was really fun. After that, I listened to Indigo Spell by Rochelle Mead. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I think this is one of the highest ratings that I've given this series so far. This series is one that is a companion to the Vampire Academy novels. It follows Sydney, who is an alchemist, and we learn more about alchemists in the last few books of Vampire Academy, so I'm not really going to spoil you on that aspect. But this specific book follows Sydney as she is just still going to school, still trying to protect her task and learn as much as she can about the world around her when witches come to town. And there is a big bad witch that might be trying to threaten everything about her life. It was really interesting. It took a very different turn than the previous two books in the series, and I just really enjoyed the sides of Sydney that we saw. I think that she started to really come into herself and become a better alchemist, but also a better human, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I loved Adrian's parts in this story. I really like how they worked together in this one. It was just well done, and I can't wait to continue reading this series. It's just very nostalgic for me. It's making me really want to go back to Vampire Academy, but not until I finish this series. Next up was Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. I've been reading this for months. Basically, all you have to know is this follows Laszlo, who is a dreamer, and he is a librarian that has been absolutely obsessed with this lost city of Weep since before he could remember. He had always been interested in Weep, but his curiosity was truly ignited the day that he completely forgot Weep's true name. He knew that it had had another name once upon a time. In fact, he knows so much about it that when a convoy comes that is going to Weep, they take him along with them to help them discover what has been wrong with this city. It was so good. This continuation was beautiful. It was a lot of character development. I will say that it started off very, very slow. It was kind of hard for me to concentrate, mostly because it was so character driven in the beginning. We barely go through a day and a half, I believe, in this whole book, but the ending was so worth it. Getting to know all those characters so well through the first like 200 pages made you appreciate so much more the events that take place after the 200 pages. There's a lot that happens. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of well done conflict, and there's so much character development. The only thing that I really feel like describes how well these characters were developed was that by the end, I liked Minya. And if you read Strange the Dreamer and you know who Minya is, yeah, I liked her. Read this, figure it out. I don't know. It was just so lyrical. I love how Laini Taylor writes, and I'm really glad that I finally got to read this. I read Cersei by Madeline Miller next, and I really, really loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was so much more than I thought it would be. Madeline Miller has such a way to make you feel that you are truly in this goddess's head. You are truly in Cersei's head, and this is truly what happened all those hundreds of years ago. It feels that way. It doesn't feel like a retelling, it feels realistic. In this story, we follow Cersei, who is the daughter of Helios, one of the most powerful titans. She doesn't have much power in the beginning until she finds out that she does, and she's a witch. And then she is sent to a deserted island by Zeus, where she just has to try and survive, honestly. She learns more about witchcraft, she learns more about herself, and we get to see her grow as a goddess, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years go by in her lifespan. She is bound to change. She is bound to be evil at some points and kind in others and motherly in some and vengeful in others. It was just really well done. It just felt very realistic, and I liked the way that you learn about her life in this, because, you know, I'd only really ever known about Cersei through the Odyssey, obviously, and through the little bits that we saw of her in the Percy Jackson series, so I loved seeing her story. I read The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This was just, this was everything. It was 5 stars in my book. It's just so freaking sweet. Guys, the artwork is so beautiful and colorful, and the story is just so wholesome wholesome. We just follow these people that care so much about tea dragons and this one specific girl that's just helping everyone around her, and it was a very wholesome story. It made me very, 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 very happy, and I can't wait to see anything else that Katie O'Neill makes because I'm definitely going to read it. This is a story that I will come back to time and time again. I just felt so happy afterward. It was a very touching story. I cried because I was so happy. That doesn't happen to me in books. It doesn't at all. Next, I read The Princess Saves Herself in this one by Amanda Lovelace. I originally gave this book, I believe, 4 stars, but I have since then knocked it down to 3. I really did enjoy certain aspects of this poetry collection, but there were others that were very grim and made me feel very, very sad afterwards. The beginning is very hard to read. It is a lot about her mother and how her mother didn't treat her right. And then the middle is a lot about grief and people around her dying, which those parts were just hard to read. But the end was very hopeful and I enjoyed it a lot. The only thing that I will have to say that also had an anchor in why I lowered my rating was that the very end was just like a kind of random splattering of poems that felt very like social justice-y but without reason, and almost felt like she was talking about these stories just to talk about them, not because they truly had an impact on her life. That is what I got out of them. That doesn't mean that's what it really truly was, but I just felt like it almost felt like a cop-out, like, hey, look at all these social justice things that I'm talking about. Aren't you interested? But it's probably not that. It probably was from a more wholesome place in her heart. Maybe I'm just being cynical, but that did have an impact on why I rated it the way I did. And then we have Night and Cake and Puppets by Laini Taylor. If you had told me that I had rated this book 5 stars before I had read it, I would be laughing in your face. But I rated this 5 stars because it was amazing and it was so happy. This is one of those stories that made me so happy again. We are following Carew from The Daughter of Smoke and Bones' best friend, Susanna, and we're following her on the night where she finally confronts Violin Boy, who is Mick, and they have this cute story of how they start to date, and it is just so lovely. There are drawings throughout it all. It was a wholesome story. I don't know what else to say about it. I loved this. I loved this probably more than I loved the entire Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, so yeah. I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I tabbed this book more than I've tabbed any book this size ever, and I gave this 5 stars, obviously. I don't think I really need to talk about Harry Potter's about because we all know, basically. I feel like it would be pretty hard not to know what Harry Potter's about at this point, so we'll just talk about why I loved it. I really enjoyed being in this world. I felt so nostalgic. It really was different for me because this is my first time rereading it, so I have a better idea of how the movies are than how the books are. So seeing Harry Potter as he is in this story was so eye-opening. It was just a very different version of Harry than we really see in the movies, because even though Harry and Ron and Hermione are basically the same movie to book, they are different in certain aspects. We have more of their lines, more of their dialogue, more of what makes them them, and I loved seeing their friendship come to life. I loved seeing them be brave little 6th graders. Okay, it's not 6th grade, it's 1st year, you know, but it's 6th grade. They were just so cute and sweet and wholesome, and it went by a lot faster than I thought it would. It was a lot more fast-paced than I'd originally assumed it would be. I'm very happy that I got to reread it. The last book that I read for the reading rush, I just realized I was going to tell you to just check out my reading rush vlogs instead of telling you every thought about my reading rush wrap up. But we're already here, so we're just gonna end it strong. So the last book I read for the reading rush was Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This is a collection of like fairy tales from the Grishaverse that Leigh Bardugo has made. I did really enjoy this. I gave it a 3.5 stars because there were like 2 stories that really just fell flat for me, while the other, I believe 3, were amazing. So it wasn't perfect, but I did really enjoy seeing like her twists on fairy tales that seem to be in our modern world, but for the Grishaverse. It was very cute trying to pair them up with the stories that I felt I knew and had in my real life. So I enjoyed that about it, and I really loved the artwork. I actually tabbed the tops of them because I think that the artwork in this is so stunning. That is beautiful. I enjoyed reading this, and I really feel like it's a cute little backstory to have going into the Grisha universe books. So maybe now I'll pick up Shadow and Bone again and reread that series, reread Six of Crows, and finally get to King of Scars, because I've literally been waiting on rereading all those books until I read King of Scars. And the last book I read this month, I actually read to fulfill an Owls challenge, to fulfill the career goals of becoming an alchemist. And that was Roomies by Christina Lauren. This is my first Christina Lauren book ever, and I have to say I really loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It was a 5-star for most of the book, then I really didn't like a lot of the things that happened that were kind of based solely on miscommunication. This story follows Holland, who is living in New York City and doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. She graduated with a master's in fine arts and she still doesn't really know where to go from there, and she's working at a theater. And when she comes across this guitarist that is otherworldly in his musical talent named Calvin, she knows that he has to be in her uncle's Broadway show. But when she finds out that he is an immigrant from Ireland that has no green card, she decides that the only way to keep him in the States is to marry him. And that's how they become roomies, honestly. So it's very cute. I loved seeing their love story just kind of grow and evolve because she was so insecure during the entire thing, and it was really nice to see that he actually did have pure intentions. Like, she constantly was thinking that he didn't, and like as the reader I felt like he constantly did, and then he was always proving himself, proving that he really did like her and things like that. Obviously it evolves into more, guys. It's a Christina Lauren book, and I just felt it was appropriately steamy, but again, I was really disappointed by the miscommunication factors in this. It just felt like unnecessary. Those are the 19 books that I read in July, and can you believe that I'm trying to read the same amount, if not more, in August? Because yeah, look out for my Newts TBR, guys. I'm so excited for the Newts. I'm so happy that I finished my owls, and I'm so happy that this TBR video is over because I was stressed. 19 books to talk about. Well, let me know if you've read any of the books that I read this month. Again, let me know if you have any graphic novel recommendations for me. That's gonna be it for this month's, I was gonna say that's gonna be it for this month's video. That's it, just the one video. That's gonna be it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Goodbye!
What beautiful creatures.